Senate Subcommittee on Aviation Safety, Operations, and Innovation. Thank you all for joining us today to hear testimony from stakeholders regarding innovative aviation technologies and new entrants to the national airspace system. New entrants include innovations in advanced air mobility, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, and uncrewed aerial systems commonly known as drones. These technologies have a wide range of applications, from inspecting critical infrastructure to delivering medicine in remote areas to improving mobility in urban areas. Along with advancements in electric propulsion, these innovative approaches offer opportunities to transport passengers and cargo or to provide other aviation services while reducing carbon emissions. As we begin the process of reauthorizing the Federal Aviation Administration next year, Congress should incorporate provisions to advance these important developing technologies. And our hearing today is an opportunity to consider the challenges ahead and the approaches Congress can take to address those challenges. Advanced air mobility is an exciting technology that has the ability to completely reshape the future of aviation. Analysts estimate that the AAM market in the United States could reach $115 billion in the next 10 years, increase the public's access to aviation, and strengthen national security while contributing far less greenhouse gas emissions than current aviation technologies. Given these benefits, there's widespread global interest from countries in Europe, Asia, and elsewhere to lead on AAM technologies, and the United States needs to develop a plan to be the global leader of this technology. There are similarities between AAM and the bipartisan work Congress did in the recently enacted CHIPS and Science Act. Working with many of my colleagues from this committee, including Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Wicker, and Senator Young, we helped support domestic manufacturing for semiconductors and drastically improved federal research and development for innovative science and technologies. As AAM continues to advance, Congress and the federal government must position the United States to be the global leader of this technology. We must have a regulatory framework that ensures the safety of passengers and people on the ground, while creating an inviting ecosystem for domestic AAM manufacturing and operations here in the United States. That's why I welcomed the opportunity to join my Commerce Committee colleague, Senator Moran, to introduce the Advanced Air Mobility Coordination and Leadership Act. Our legislation will develop an interagency working group to evaluate, plan, and coordinate efforts regarding the safety, infrastructure, and security of developing AAM in the United States. The Department of Transportation will lead this working group, but given the technical complexity of this industry and the many beneficial uses, we will incorporate expertise from across the federal government to advance this effort on a broader scale. Our legislation passed the Senate unanimously on September 21st and will soon head to the President's desk. I look forward to our legislation becoming law so DOT and many other agencies can begin their work without delay. The Moran-Sinema AAM Leadership Bill is just the first step. In order to ensure safety, the FAA needs to provide clarity and certainty to the entrepreneurs and innovators who are developing this new technology. Earlier this year, the FAA changed the path for certification of these AAM aircraft, which created confusion amongst stakeholders. Looking ahead, in order to provide certainty, the FAA needs to promulgate timely regulations to ensure that commercial operations occur safely, that pilots are trained appropriately, and that the aviation workforce will be ready to fill the AAM jobs of the future. The United States will also need additional infrastructure in order to safely and effectively integrate AAM into our national airspace. I was proud to lead negotiations on the bipartisan infrastructure law, known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which invested $25 billion in aviation infrastructure over 5 years. These investments will fund improvements at every airport across the country, while rebuilding and modernizing air traffic control infrastructure. As I visit airports across Arizona, I'm starting to see the benefits of these historic investments. This week, the FAA released vertiport design standards to safely integrate AAM into airports. Today, our panelists will provide their thoughts about the infrastructure, including electric charging infrastructure needed for a robust AAM build-out. Today's hearing will also focus on drones and developing the drone economy of the future. Like AAM, this is another area where we need to maintain American leadership and build upon previous successes. Interest in drones from both the commercial and recreational perspective remains strong. As of January 2022, over 860,000 drones have been registered with the FAA, along with over 260,000 drone pilots. Drones are providing crucial services to Arizona and throughout the nation. They can deliver essential cargo, such as medicine, to rural areas and tribal communities. Drones also have the ability to monitor and inspect vital infrastructure, including pipelines, electric transmission lines, and railroads for routine maintenance and after natural disasters when conditions may not be safe for human inspectors. This is a promising track record, but again, there's more work to do if the United States is to remain ahead of foreign competitors. For example, Congress can work with aviation stakeholders and the FAA to expedite regulations for safe drone operations beyond visual line of sight, which may be still years off. Additionally, we'll hear today from leaders in electric propulsion, which presents an opportunity to reduce noise levels of aircraft while simultaneously minimizing carbon emissions from aircraft engines. Our committee will benefit from learning more about electric aircraft and any barriers developers face that hinder the growth of this technology. We have an excellent panel today with witnesses representing industry and thought leaders across the AAM, drone, and electric propulsion industries. Our witnesses will advise us on Congress's role in boosting these sectors, creating jobs, and securing American leadership in the aviation advances of the 21st century. Thank you all for joining us today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ranking Member Cruz for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your holding this hearing today. This is a critically important issue, and one that, frankly, I don't know that we have given nearly enough attention to. From drones to air taxis to new propulsion systems, the aviation enterprise is filled with new and exciting technologies that promise to transform how we live and how we work. Whether it is delivery drones getting medications to seniors in the most rural parts of the country, or industrial drones doing long-distance pipeline inspections to ensure the safe transportation of oil and natural gas. New vertical takeoff and landing vehicles enabling low-cost, short-haul air transportation and reducing congestion in cities. Or new propulsion technologies which will use less fuel or even new fuels to go farther with less. It's an exciting time to be in aviation. But as I'm sure our witnesses will discuss today, everyone in this space is facing a similar problem: uncertainty. And while the issues facing the FAA are numerous and many of them are very complex, the inability of the agency to do its job and to manage the national airspace system is threatening to cut American innovation and global leadership off at the knees. Whether that is on the certification front for new platforms, rules for remote ID or operations beyond visual line of sight, integration into the air traffic management enterprise, or any number of other issues, our regulatory system too often is paralyzed with indecision. They are exceedingly complex and would present a challenge for even the smartest and most well-equipped. But some days the FAA seems unable to do even the most basic parts of its job. And I think, especially more recently, this is in no small part due to a lack of leadership both at FAA and at DOT, and a lack of interest on the part of the White House. Just take a look at the FAA's organizational chart. Throughout the agency, there are more than a dozen important roles being filled by acting officials, including the very top spot. They are in places like the Aviation Safety Office, the Air Traffic Organization, the Assistant Administrator for NextGen, the International Affairs Office, and Air Traffic Safety Services. Even when the administration finally sends us a nominee for FAA Administrator, they send someone with almost zero aviation experience, a requisite for the job, and who, as recent news has highlighted, has more than a little bit of scandal surrounding him. It is more than a little rich watching the Transportation Secretary beat up on the airlines when he seems to simultaneously ignore the absolute hollowing out of the FAA and the lack of confirmed permanent leadership over there. Somehow, Secretary Buttigieg has the time and resources to run around the country cutting ribbons on infrastructure projects and to launch a new, quote, airline customer service dashboard, but can't find the time to fill critical vacancies at the FAA. The Secretary hasn't even responded to questions, for the record, from his budget hearing in May of this year, 5 months ago. And look, I get that you, the panel before us, you don't represent the FAA. But I don't know how you look at what I just outlined and think that anyone in this administration is placing aviation at the top of their priority list. Even as we are meeting here today, there are still dozens of rules and reports from the last FAA reauthorization in 2018 that still haven't been done. One thing I authored, the Commercial Balloon Pilot Safety Act, which simply requires the FAA to require a medical certificate for commercial balloon pilots, and which was the result of a horrific balloon crash in Texas, and recommendations from the NTSB, still remains incomplete years after we passed it into law. In fact, it wasn't until November of last year that the FAA even issued a notice of proposed rulemaking. 3 years after the 2018 reauthorization. If the FAA can't even get something like this done, commercial air balloon safety, how exactly are we supposed to have faith that they can get the much more complex tasks around integrating new entrants done, let alone done in a timely and efficient way? So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses what they think about what needs to be done. If it's more resources for the FAA, faster regulatory timelines, organizational shakeups, we're all ears. Congress has almost always taken a collaborative approach in aviation regulation, directing the FAA to go through rulemakings to get stakeholder input and shaping and crafting regulations based on feedback. But in this space, where emerging technologies are meeting an old and entrenched bureaucracy, we are very quickly getting to a point where something has to give. And I, for one, am determined that what gives will not be continued American leadership in aviation. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the chair of the Full Commerce Committee, Senator Cantwell, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Sinema. Thanks for chairing this important hearing along with your colleague, Ranking Member Cruz, and the important witnesses that we're having today. I also want to thank you. You mentioned the CHIPS and Science Act, and want to thank you for your help and leadership in the final days of our negotiations and getting that done. Today, we're here to hear from a set of witnesses to talk about the current issues of aviation and the fact that an FAA bill is due for reauthorization next year. This is an opportunity to talk about the prospects of that and what needs to be addressed. Today's hearing will specifically examine how Congress can help advance aerospace safety and innovation, and what we need to do for the future, whether that is drones to new air mobility concepts. So I look forward to hearing from all of the witnesses. I'm especially happy to hear from Gregory Davis, President and CEO of Aviation. I want to congratulate Aviation on yesterday's first flight of Alice, the first time an all-electric consumer aircraft built from the ground up took flight. I wish we had time to show the video from it, because you can hear a lot of cheers at Moses Lake from everybody there for this historic occasion. This groundbreaking aircraft took flight from a 13,000-foot runway at Moses Lake Flight Test Center in the heart of Washington, along with local partner companies like MagnaX and Aerotech. I can see why this project has been so successful. Electric aircraft like Alice, built using 95% composite materials, represent an inspiring promise of American-built innovation, an exciting future of sustainable aviation. Locations like Moses Lake show how a combination of public infrastructure and private sector ingenuity create a hotbed for developing next-generation aerospace technology. Aviation and advanced air mobility concept provide an opportunity to expand connectivity to regionally and underserved communities and airports. We know that half of all flights in the U.S. are less than 500 miles in range. So yesterday's successful integration test flights prove the concept that we have sustainable aviation technology and that it can transport people to these short and middle mile regional routes. This significantly can reduce the aviation's industry environmental impacts in terms of carbon emission and noise pollutions, and achieving the technical milestones enables companies like Aviation to focus on commercialization of aircraft like Alice in line with the evolution of battery technology, something that was a very key part of the CHIPS and Science Act. And the FAA certification process will also have to be there to move forward on the all-electric flight if it is to become an industry standard. But for me, I think the CEO has said it best, that these new opportunities for places like Seattle to Walla Walla, or maybe Spokane to Missoula, or Moses Lake to parts of Oregon or California, are now the kinds of things that would be more economical with these kinds of flights. Electric planes can connect regional communities in ways previously not possible. There are more than 2,000 underutilized airports in the United States and noise restrictions that cover more than 200 airports in the United States alone. So Congress has made significant progress to empower this kind of innovation and dynamics, and we need to continue to work to help those opportunities move forward. The 2022 Inflation Reduction Act provided a grant program to develop sustainable aviation fuel and also to incent other types of manufacturing like electric. Because of our success in passing the CHIPS and Science Act, $280 billion is authorized to bolster innovation, create new regional tech hubs, and make historic investments in basic research and translational science. So we know that investing in innovation will help us for tomorrow. Another innovation are the new entrants in aviation. For example, drones, one of the fastest growing segments of aviation in the United States. Over 860,000 drones have been registered with the FAA. And as of January, over 260,000 remote pilots have been certified. The FAA expects this number of registered drones to grow as high as 2.3 million by 2024. The use case for drones continues to grow well beyond the package delivery to include surveying, infrastructure inspection, precision agriculture, weather monitoring, and even disaster response. The Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International forecasts that between 2015 and 2025, civilian drones will add $82 billion to the U.S. economy, along with 103,000 new high-paying jobs that do require a technical degree. So additionally, U.S.-based manufacturers are busy designing and building electric aircraft with vertical takeoff and landing capability. These operations can take off like a helicopter, my colleagues before me have mentioned this, and then fly to a fixed-wing airplane. According to Deloitte, the AAM market in the United States is estimated to reach $115 billion by 2035, 0.5% of the country's current GDP, and create more than 280,000 paying jobs by 2035. Importantly, AAM and alternative propulsion technologies are environmentally friendly and a must-have for the industry's future. Aviation contributes 12.5% of U.S. transportation emissions and accounts for 3% of the nation's total greenhouse gas production. So dealing with these issues is going to be vitally important for the future. So I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and thinking about the future of aviation. But as my colleagues have pointed out, it does require strong leadership from the FAA. The bill that Senator Wicker and I passed that we expect and will continue to have oversight over the FAA to get the right policies in place, get the right people in place, and continue to focus on security as well as competitiveness. Security will help us be the leaders in aviation. And I hope that we can talk about how to continue to maintain that as we move forward with the reauthorization. I thank the chair.
Thank you, Chair. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Wicker, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I say to the members of the panel, surely you must realize eventually you're going to get a chance to talk at this hearing. But I do want to thank Senator Sinema, Cruz, and Cantwell for convening this hearing of the subcommittee and beginning work on reauthorizing the FAA for next year. Today, there are nearly 900,000 registered drones used for recreational and commercial purposes. These drones perform a wide range of valuable tasks: cargo delivery, aerial photography, information gathering, and geographic mapping. During the recent pandemic, emergency waivers granted by the FAA provided a positive indication of the potential of drones. Operating safely outside the normal rules, we witnessed fleets of drones delivering food and medicine to those quarantined at home, giving us a window into the future. Drone use during the pandemic also highlighted the importance of R&D for improving safety and performance. In partnership with the FAA, universities and industry are now helping to enhance the drone traffic management systems, air traffic control, interoperability, safety, and pilot training. I'm proud that my home state of Mississippi and Mississippi State University lead a consortium called Assure to carry out much of this critical R&D. In 2015, the FAA designated Assure as the agency's center of excellence for drone R&D and recently agreed to extend that role through May of 2025. I want to recognize Assure's executive director, retired Air Force Colonel Steve Luxian, who is one of our witnesses today. I hope Colonel Luxian will touch on some of the important research carried out by Assure and how it will help integrate drones into our airspace in a safe manner. Just as drones are becoming commonplace, another suite of aviation technology known as Advanced Air Mobility, or AAM, is emerging. AAM is not a single technology, but rather a collection of technologies applied to the aviation system. AAM vehicles have many potential uses, such as transporting passengers, as Senator Cantwell has alluded, moving cargo, assisting firefighters, and connecting rural communities to larger cities. Electric-powered aircraft, or air taxis, for example, may someday be able to airlift people like me across town or to the airport in a matter of minutes. Much of the basic technology for AAM aircraft is already developed. The FAA should begin certifying AAM vehicles as early as 2024. The industry has now shifted its focus to infrastructure and workforce development and the regulatory process. The last FAA Reauthorization Act helped pave the way for expanded drone use. I hope next year's bill will do the same for AAM. In that vein, the committee would benefit from our witnesses' perspective on regulatory and policy questions we should tackle in the next reauthorization bill. As we gather inputs for reauthorization, we should be mindful of the safety, efficiency, and security of new technologies, while at the same time continuing to promote innovation in this vital sector. Thank you, Senator Sinema, and I yield back 1 minute and 21 seconds.
Greatly appreciated there, Senator Wicker. Thank you so much. Now I'll introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. Our first witness is Lisa Ellman. Ms. Ellman is the Executive Director of the Commercial Drone Alliance and is a widely recognized authority on drone policy and law. Ms. Ellman, thank you for joining us today, and you're now recognized for your opening statement.
Chairwoman Sinema, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the Subcommittee on Aviation Safety, Operations, and Innovation. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts at this important hearing today on how we can promote aviation innovation safely for the benefit of the American public. My name is Lisa Ellman, and I am the Executive Director of the Commercial Drone Alliance and Chair of the Uncrewed Aircraft Systems Practice at Hogan Lovells, at the global law firm of Hogan Lovells. I am honored to provide remarks on behalf of the CDA to inform your work on the upcoming FAA reauthorization. The CDA is an independent nonprofit organization made up of leaders in the commercial drone and advanced air mobility industries. We work with all levels of government to collaborate on policies for safe and secure commercial drone integration. The commercial drone industry is delivering significant life-saving, societal, and economic benefits for all Americans. As just a few examples, drones are enhancing worker safety. In 2020, there were 54 accidents resulting in 13 deaths in the aerial agricultural industry, including accidents in Texas, Colorado, Georgia, Illinois, Nevada, South Dakota, Missouri, and Kansas. Use of drones for these operations can prevent such fatalities. Drones are promoting infrastructure resilience, providing early detection of oil and gas leaks, and inspecting our nation's railways, bridges, and electrical grid. Drones are protecting the environment and enhancing sustainability, offering a substitute for ground vehicles and reducing carbon emissions associated with traditional inspection methods. Drones are expanding access to medicines and critical supplies and democratizing aviation by opening the industry to a broader aviation workforce. Drones are enhancing public safety, fighting wildfires, and assisting with disaster response. In Florida today, Florida Power and Light Company is deploying and flying drones in response to Hurricane Ian. Advancing this industry will ensure America's global competitiveness, our national security, and our leadership in global aviation. But these benefits will be fully realized only if Congress takes action. Congress led the way in 2012 by mandating UAS integration. In the decades since, that mandate remains unfulfilled, and drones are often subject to application of incongruous regulations designed for crewed aircraft. Despite the best efforts of the FAA's UAS Integration Office and other supporters, the FAA continues to view UAS integration as, in its own words, a long road ahead and a significant challenge. Progress towards safe, scalable drone integration has been exceedingly slow, and America is falling behind other countries. Bold and decisive congressional leadership is necessary once again to spur progress for scalable UAS operations for the benefit of the American public. While there is much that can be done in the interim, the FAA reauthorization provides an excellent opportunity for Congress to demonstrate that leadership. I've included many legislative proposals in our written testimony. I will highlight just a few of them here. First, Congress should reorganize the FAA to better align responsibility for UAS integration with authority over UAS approvals. The core challenges with UAS integration do not relate to safety. Rather, they are process-based, featuring a well-meaning government bureaucracy designed for regulating crewed aviation, struggling to regulate an evolving environment. Common sense changes to the current organization would assist the agency to fulfill its mission safely and efficiently. Second, Congress should promote U.S. competitiveness by enabling safe, scaled commercial drone operations in the United States, including by directing timely implementation of the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee's excellent recommendations. Third, Congress should invest in the future. Congress should support workforce development training for careers in drones, along with the use of drones to inspect local infrastructure, by enacting the DIG Act. We applaud Senators Blumenthal and Rosen for introducing this legislation, which recently passed the House. Congress should also enable research and development by streamlining and improving approval processes. We include many more proposals and details within our written testimony, and I'm happy to answer follow-up questions. The opportunity cost of inaction continues to grow as the gap between technology and policy in the United States continues to widen. Congress has the opportunity in the next FAA reauthorization to close this gap and bring the benefits of commercial drones to the American public. The Commercial Drone Alliance appreciates the opportunity to appear before you. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with you to ensure America's global leadership in advanced aviation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next witness is Gregory Davis, President and Interim Chief Executive Officer of Aviation, a developer and manufacturer of electric aircraft. Mr. Davis is also a licensed commercial pilot and has had over 15 years in leadership roles at aerospace companies. Mr. Davis, thank you for joining us remotely today. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you very much for having me today. As you said, my name is Gregory Davis, and I'm the CEO of Aviation, manufacturer of electric aircraft based in Arlington, Washington. We are manufacturing the world's first all-electric commuter aircraft integrating battery.
Mr. Davis, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. You're cutting in and out. If it's okay with you, I'm going to have our tech folks work on that for a second, and we'll move on and then come back. Is that okay with everyone? Great. So we'll move to our next witness, our retired Colonel Stephen Luxian, who prefers to go by Lux. I like it. Lux is the Executive Director of the Alliance for System Safety of UAS through Research Excellence at Mississippi State University's Stennis Space Center campus. He previously served in the U.S. Air Force for more than 30 years, where he led the Air Force's first armed UAV squadron. Lux, thanks for joining us today, and you're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Sinema, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the subcommittee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today about uncrewed aircraft systems, or UAS. I will speak today from my 7 years' experience as the Executive Director of Assure, a Mississippi State University-led alliance of 26 leading research universities and over 100 industry and government partners that serve as the FAA Center of Excellence. I also served 30 years in the Air Force, where I was fortunate to play a leadership role in the integration of UAS. From this perspective, I have to say it is mostly a good news story of innovation, growth, development, and safety. In 2014, Congress called on the FAA to establish a UAS Center of Excellence to provide the academic research, data, and support necessary to inform the FAA and its regulatory responsibilities to integrate uncrewed aircraft safely and efficiently into the national airspace system. In 2015, the FAA awarded Assure that responsibility through a competitive process. A lot has happened in the 7 years since Assure was established. With the tremendous support of Congress, Assure has grown from a $500,000 appropriation to $14 million in matched funding annually. To date, congressional support for the FAA through Assure is approximately $91 million. These funds have supported more than 60 projects, including advanced air mobility, cybersecurity, and the integration of UAS for disaster response, just to name a few. Assure Research has supported FAA rulemaking and the development of industry consensus standards. Additionally, Assure continues to develop a network of worldwide affiliations to harmonize rulemaking and standards globally. Canada, the United Kingdom, Israel, and Singapore now have affiliate universities in the Assure Consortium. Currently, Assure is in discussions with Australia and New Zealand to develop affiliations there. The COE's work supporting the FAA has led to other developments. We are engaged in 9 studies for NASA, which investigate the technologies to support uncrewed aircraft traffic management, so critical to beyond visual line of sight operations, multi-UAS control, and improved aviation weather forecasting below 500 feet. Congress has also supported Assure through FEMA and NIST in the integration of UAS technology into public safety and disaster response. Assure is leading the development of Assured Safe, a federated ecosystem that will provide standards, education, training, testing, certification, and credentialing of first responders' use of UAS in the systems themselves. Although progress is being made on integration, there are 2 areas that I believe need attention. First, there is a need for a national UAS roadmap. From the COE perspective, I see the FAA waiting on signals and investment from industry to tell it where to focus its regulatory efforts. But industry is waiting on the FAA to develop pathways to certification and operations to help reduce their regulatory risk. The FAA should produce a detailed regulatory roadmap that includes identification of specific regulations and standards to support industry and public safety, an office of primary responsibility for each, and the research necessary to inform their development. It is critical that this roadmap have milestones and actual dates. The FAA should involve key stakeholders, including industry, academia, and standard committee leadership in the development of this plan. A detailed roadmap would help all stakeholders, including Congress, to provide appropriate resources, measure success, and make adjustments as required. Second, Assure requests that Congress suspend its policy on cost share to help improve diversity and inclusion and also increase the amount of research that is so needed to speed rulemaking and standards development. As we look to grow our capability, and capacity and include more partners, we found that cost share requirements are an obstacle to participation for minority-serving institutions. Moreover, during the pandemic, assuring the FAA demonstrated that reduced cost share requirements led to actually greater participation in research. A trial period of relief would increase participation of minority-serving institutions in research and eliminate the financial burden and risk across all COE universities. Increased regulatory progress would also incentivize industry to stay actively engaged. Thank you for your recent efforts to help secure the FAA's extension of Assure as its UAS Center of Excellence through May 2025. I look forward to your questions and collaborating with you and your staffs in the future.
Thank you. We're still working through some of the technical difficulties with Mr. Davis, so we'll move on to our next witness. Welcome to an Arizonan, Stefan Fimat, Vice President and General Manager for Honeywell Aerospace's Unmanned Aerial Systems and Urban Air Mobility Business Unit. He's led Honeywell's Aerospace UAS-UAM business unit since its creation in March 2020. Mr. Fimat, thank you for traveling from Phoenix to Washington, D.C. to testify today, and you're recognized for your opening statement.
Chair Sinema, Ranking Member Cruz, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to today's hearing to discuss Honeywell's perspective on the upcoming FAA Reauthorization Act with respect to integrating new entrants into the national airspace system. My name is Stefan Fimat. I am the Vice President and General Manager of Honeywell's Urban Air Mobility and Unmanned Aerial Systems Business Unit. Honeywell Aerospace is proudly based in Arizona, a leader in the aerospace industry and home to 19 of our facilities and nearly 7,000 employees. Honeywell invented the autopilot over 100 years ago and continues to innovate to this day. We are in a great position to help shape the future of advanced aerial mobility. Our Urban Aerial Mobility Lab in Phoenix is where we are pioneering technologies without which these aircraft just are not possible. Examples include automated flight control and actuation systems, electric propulsion systems that enable ultra-quiet and emission-free aircraft, detect and avoid systems to prevent collisions with other aircraft and obstacles. In particular, Honeywell invests a large portion of our R&D into technology that makes flight more sustainable, such as electric power generation, hydrogen fuel cells, and sustainable aviation fuel. These new aircraft are set to be the most profound change in the aerospace industry and in people's lives since the invention of the jet engine. They will take off and land vertically just like a helicopter and fly on their wings just like an airplane. During takeoff and landing, they are no louder than a modern dishwasher, enabling them to pick you up and drop you off right in your neighborhood. They can do the same for cargo, enabling companies to fly goods directly from warehouse to warehouse and streamline the supply chain. Small drones can drop off smart parcels directly to your home and emergency supplies to disaster areas. However, the lack of a clear pathway to the certification of these aircraft and an absence of regulation to enable long-distance commercial drone operations challenge this industry. Countries that lead in the development of new modes of transportation establish or reaffirm their global leadership. We have seen this before in the auto industry, the rocket industry, and the airline industry. But developing is not enough. We must also lead in implementation as well. Like the US has done in the past with the interstate highway system and like Europe has done with high-speed rail. This is the next new mode of transportation, and it is playing out today. The pace of technology innovation is accelerating, which means that the pace of regulation must also accelerate, or the United States will be left behind. It's time to come together to remove the regulatory gaps and make this a reality. We recommend that Congress mandate the FAA to have AAM aircraft certification regulations enacted by 2024. Validate AAM aircraft certified in Europe using our existing bilateral aviation safety agreements. Ensure its regulations are harmonized with these countries by 2024. Develop certification standards for autonomous aircraft, including unpiloted and reduced crew cargo and passenger-carrying vehicles. And complete the rulemaking to enable regular, beyond visual line of sight operations for drones of all sizes by 2024. At Honeywell, our single-minded mission is to co-create together with leading aircraft designers, the advanced aerial mobility industry. I commend Chair Sinema, Senator Moran, and the committee for the recent passage of the bipartisan Advanced Air Mobility Coordination and Leadership Act. I also applaud the efforts of the FAA, particularly in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Rulemaking Committee, for working more closely with industry and stakeholders. Next year's FAA Reauthorization Act presents an important opportunity for Congress to make U.S. global leadership in AAM and drones a top national priority and address the remaining regulatory gaps. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Next, we have Ed Bolin, the President and CEO. President and CEO of the National Business Aviation Association. Mr. Bolin has led NBAA since 2004 and previously served in senior leadership roles at the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. He was appointed by President George W. Bush to serve on the Commission on the Future of the U.S. Aerospace Industry. Mr. Bolin, thank you for joining us today, and you're recognized for your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chair Sinema, Ranking Member Cruz, members of the subcommittee. It's a great honor to be here today talking about an important milestone in the evolution of on-demand air mobility. You know, for decades, the National Business Aviation Association has represented companies that rely on general aviation aircraft to get people and products where they need to be when they need to be there. Over the decades, that has been evidenced in a variety of technologies. Companies have used biplanes and monoplanes, fixed-wing aircraft and rotor-wing aircraft. They've used propulsion systems, including radials and pistons and turbines. And the aircraft themselves have been built with wood and fabric, aluminum, and composites. Today, the United States is fortunate to have the world's largest, safest, most efficient, and most diverse air transportation system in the world. And our country has benefited enormously from that. But today we have an opportunity to talk about technologies that can do even more. In your opening remarks, several of you mentioned the importance of predictability and certainty. And let me say this, we are all certain that advanced air mobility has the potential to bring enormous benefits to our country, to our citizens, to our communities. It has the potential to bring societal benefits and economic benefits and national security benefits. It has the ability to make on-demand air mobility more sustainable, more accessible, more affordable. We want and we need advanced air mobility. Here are some of the things that we as a country need to do. As Stefan said, we need to make it a national priority. We need a coordinated national strategy. We also need transparency, communication, and certainty in our regulations and our process. We need to have concurrent, collaborative work being done. Like the others, I want to thank Senator Sinema and Moran for the AAM Coordination and Leadership Act. That is important because it brings together different departments within the U.S. government to make sure we are working together, not at cross purposes. I also want to focus on what we need to do in terms of coordination and communication within the FAA, and that is we need to be concurrent and collaborative across all of the various lines of business. In order for AAM to come to the forefront, companies will need to get type certificates. They'll need to get production certificates. The operators will need operation specifications, and we're going to need an infrastructure that facilitates those operations. We need to work collaboratively and concurrently for all of those eventualities, not sequentially, one after another. This is an important opportunity. And I've already mentioned the infrastructure, and it's an infrastructure that is forward-looking. Today, the United States is blessed to have an amazing network of general aviation airports, 5,000 public use airports. They're in every congressional district. They're in some of our tribal areas. They provide access to our air transportation system, to the world economy. In order for us to move forward, we need to recognize that the infrastructure of the future will require electrification. It may require hydrogen. We have an opportunity to build for the future now. Here again, I want to thank Senator Moran, who worked with Senator Padilla to introduce, and this committee has passed, the Advanced Aviation Infrastructure Modernization Act, an important opportunity to plan, to provide grants for the planning and construction of the infrastructure of tomorrow. We need to be about that today. We also need to focus on the workforce of tomorrow. We're talking about technologies that are relying on electric propulsion, things that we don't necessarily have expertise within the FAA and within some of the communities. We need to focus on how we bring the best and the brightest into our community as we go forward. As I said before, this is an important milestone in the evolution of transportation. It has the opportunity to benefit American citizens, communities, and our country. We look forward to working closely with every member of this committee, every member of Congress, everyone in the executive branch, and people all over the country to realize the benefits of advanced air mobility. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go back to Gregory Davis, the President Interim Chief Executive Officer of Aviation. And Mr. Davis, thank you so much for joining us today, and you're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. And if I may, just to confirm that the audio is now working.
It is. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon. My name is Gregory Davis, and I'm the President and CEO of Aviation Aircraft. We are a manufacturer of all-electric aircraft based in Arlington, Washington, and we are currently in the process of developing the world's first all-electric commuter aircraft with fully integrated battery technology and electrical propulsion. Chair Sinema, Ranking Member Cruz, Chair Cantwell, and Ranking Member Wicker, and members of the Subcommittee on Aviation Safety, Operations, and Innovation, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the policies and regulations needed to usher in the new era of sustainable aviation. Yesterday, and I should thank you again for the very warm welcome, yesterday we successfully completed the first flight of our zero-emission aircraft, Alice. It was an historic day, a day for aviation history and a major milestone in electric aviation. It's the first time that an aircraft of this scale has successfully completed a flight, and it was a moment of great pride for, I would say, all of us at Aviation and for the aviation community in general. We were able to show people what affordable, clean, and sustainable aviation looks like and sounds like for the first time in a fixed-wing, all-electric aircraft. It has taken collaboration across the aviation ecosystem to reach this groundbreaking moment. It is my hope that one day this type of travel will be so prevalent in our society we will not need to use the word electric to describe it. Electric aviation has the power to transform communities across this country. Specifically, if it can restore or provide essential air services to rural communities that are often underserved. Today, only about 500 of the 5,000 airports are served by any commercial flights, despite 60% of the population being within 10 miles of an airport, active or not, and 95% being within 25 miles. We have already seen early market traction from forward-thinking operators, including Cape Air and Global Crossing for passenger travel and global cargo company DHL for e-cargo. Today I'm here to share my insights on the key areas that must be prioritized in order to make electric aviation the standard for regional travel in the United States and beyond. My comments will be addressed around eCTOL, the electric conventional takeoff and landing aircraft market, while acknowledging my greater support for the advancement of all aspects of urban air mobility and sustainable aviation. eCTOLs, like Aviation's Alice, are part of the advanced air mobility market and will allow us to leverage the existing airport and airspace infrastructure in the United States by increasing flights without increasing pollution or our carbon footprint. First, we strongly encourage the FAA to look beyond the borders of the United States and to work with global regulators such as the EASA, the European Union's Aviation Safety Agency, and Transport Canada across the border on the paths towards certifying electric aircraft. To make significant advancements and positive impact on the environment, electric aviation and sustainable aviation must be supported and adopted globally and quickly. Aviation's fastest growing source is the fastest growing source of greenhouse emissions worldwide. By 2050, our share of climate impact is expected to be 25 to 50% if nothing is done. The sustainability challenge is not only one country's challenge, it is a global challenge, and the United States has the immediate opportunity to take the leadership role. We must act with a sense of urgency to drive environmental progress, but also to push on global competitiveness and to remain out in front and attract the economic opportunity and prosperity in terms of manufacturing and jobs here in the United States. Second, it is important that the FAA focus on clear requirements for certification of battery technology, whether it pertains to an all-electric or hybrid aircraft. Standards need to be applied the same internationally so that we can focus on mass adoption of electric aviation. Global standards for battery technology will ensure that we stay focused on the greater task of reducing the environmental impact of aviation, while also increasing the commercial availability and economic and social benefits of aviation globally. Third, we encourage the FAA to work with agencies from other departments, such as the Department of Energy, on the development of charging infrastructure and battery technology. The DOE is already leading the world in terms of ground vehicle battery infrastructure with battery policies and initiatives. The same approach could be applied to the aviation industry to ensure that technology development is aligned with certification requirements for all electric aircraft. Further, there is an opportunity to tie in the Department of Energy on the expansion of aircraft charging networks to service rural and urban airports across the country. With the recent passing of Bill S-516, we believe there is clear direction to facilitate this engagement, and we look forward to working with this committee as you consider initiatives for the FAA reauthorization in 2023. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to testify today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for your opening statements. Your written statements will be entered for the record. And now we'll begin a round of questions for our witnesses. I'll first recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Fima, thank you again for being here today. Arizona is proud to be the home of Honeywell Aerospace, one of the world's leading organizations in the AAM and UAS industry. Honeywell employs thousands of Arizonans at its locations throughout the state. I had the privilege of visiting Honeywell's Deer Valley site in North Phoenix earlier this year and participating in a town hall with Honeywell employees to answer their questions about the state of our nation's aviation sector. Honeywell hosted a summit here in Washington last week on AAM and UAS issues where many industry leaders participated. What key findings and recommendations from that summit can you share with Congress as we reauthorize the FAA?
Thank you, Chair Sinema. So yes, indeed, we did host an Advanced Aerial Mobility Summit last week. I had over 250 people that attended, including government, regulators, industry trade associations, vehicle manufacturers, including companies like Lilium, Textron, Vertical Aerospace, and Archer. And indeed, there were insights, takeaways, and findings that came out of that. I think that it's not just Honeywell say this, we've all heard it here today, and we heard it at our summit loud and clear, that we have a choice here to make. Great countries have great transportation systems. And the feeling that came out of that was that we may need so far as to have a mandate from the very top of government that we will be a leader here, much like in the 60s where we chose to go to the moon. Number two, this will need a whole-of-government approach. There are many stakeholders here. It is not just the FAA. It is local government, state government, associations, industry, and communities, and it requires a whole-government approach in order for this to succeed for our communities. Number three, U.S. leadership does not mean going it alone. We had a lot of international representation at our summit last week. And so the FAA should reach out and work with the other agencies in different countries, in Europe, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. All of them are also tackling the same issues that we are. And by working together, we can come up with a set of regulations and frameworks that work not just in the United States, but that work across the world. This is important for everyone. It is especially important for the US companies that are working in this area to ensure that they have global access and global markets. Number four, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in AAM. We've heard about it today. whether it is things like transportation to offshore energy platforms or over sparsely populated areas, delivering critical supplies to disaster areas, wildfire fighting, pipeline inspections, drone inspection of critical infrastructure in general. All of these are sparsely populated environments with where you can still have very high benefits. There's no reason we can't do immediate action in these areas. And then lastly, we industry also have our job to do. We have to continue to educate consumers, citizens, government, and industry so that people really know what it is and what it isn't. There was a phrase last week, the void will be filled. Let it be filled with the correct information so that we make the right decisions. These are the sort of things that came out of our summit last week. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Boland, the House and the Senate have passed my and Senator Moran's AAM bill, the Advanced Air Mobility Coordination and Leadership Act, which will establish an interagency working group to review policies and develop programs to aid in the development and the deployment of AAM technology and identify the safety, security, and infrastructure investments required for the development of AAM. I appreciate NBAA's support for our AAM leadership legislation. Could you talk about why NBAA supports the legislation and why it's so important to harness the expertise from across the federal government to safely and effectively deploy AAM technology?
Well, thank you, Chair Sinema, and thank you for your leadership on the bill itself. This should be a national priority, something worthy of galvanizing our government to move forward. As we said before, the benefits are enormous. But what we have seen is, as a country, we do best when we have clear goals. This is what we want to achieve. So bringing together, as it was touched on, the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, finding ways to tap in to some of the things that we are committed to. When we passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we talked about the importance of electrification of vehicles. Will we be able to use that same type of approach when we are making changes to our grid to also make that available to airports and make sure that aviation is able to tap into it? Those are some of the examples of how we need to collectively come together to recognize that what we're trying to do here can enhance sustainability, accessibility, affordability of air mobility, and give us the chance to do some of those things we're talking about. You know, a lot of the things we've talked about, we've used numbers, we've used facts, just to put a face behind some of this. When we had Katrina hit New Orleans, we relied on our general aviation community, used those airports when Louis Armstrong was flooded to bring stage-to-stage relief efforts. We can do the same with advanced air mobility, particularly as we're thinking about Hurricane Ian today. We can move organs for transplant. We even have one of the AAM companies that was specifically designed to move organ transplants. The benefits are very real, but it takes a collective effort, and that's why this needs to be a national imperative and worthy of collaboration and communication across all of our various agencies and across all sides and aisles of Capitol Hill.
Thank you. I now recognize Ranking Member Cruz for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said in my opening statement, I have serious concerns that U.S. leadership is falling behind in aviation. As we continue to move forward with emerging technologies like unmanned aircraft systems and other advanced air mobility systems, I have serious doubts about how long it will take the FAA to provide the regulatory certainty that these companies need. You all represent the regulated industry, and you all have to deal with the FAA in some way, shape, or form. So I want to get a better understanding as a practical matter from each of you. From each of your perspectives, what seems to be the problems and why aren't we moving faster on fostering the growth of these new entrants, on integrating them into the national airspace? And is it a lack of resources or funds at the FAA? Is it a leadership problem? Is it what's causing the uncertainty? And I'd like each of you to address this. Ms. Ellman?
Sure. Thank you for that very important question, Senator Cruz. In our experience, first, let me start, so the technology has moved much more quickly than the policy. The challenges that the FAA is facing are systemic. I will say the individuals that I've worked with at the FAA are hardworking, well-intentioned individuals, staffers. that are trying to do what they can to integrate UAS into the national airspace. The reality is it's like fitting a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't fit. They're using, incongruous regulations designed for crewed aircraft and trying to fit UAS, commercial drones, into this regulatory framework that simply doesn't fit. From our perspective, there's been some proposals out there about, even the FAA has recognized that there's a lack of organization or a lack of leadership on this topic, and we've seen some proposals coming from the administration. We appreciate that we agree that the status quo is broken. From our perspective, we need to see responsibility and authority aligned. We need to have a leadership office. We've been talking, several of our witnesses have talked about the need for a national vision and a national strategy. Certainly, China and other countries are developing their own national strategies and moving ahead with this in this technology. We need to do the same here at home. It's critical for our global competitiveness, and the way to do that is by actually aligning responsibility with authority within the agency so that one office has the authority to actually sign off on waivers, exemptions, approvals. Right now, if you want to do research and development, it can take 2 years to get a one site-specific approval to do R&D here in the U.S. It's simply not sustainable. So we need the certainty, we need the transparency, but above all, we really need the leadership. And I'm happy we have our own proposal on this that I'm happy to follow up with you and your staff about as well.
Yeah, I would welcome it, and that's helpful. I've heard similar concerns from other stakeholders that it's hard to know to whom you go to even get an answer.
Exactly.
Colonel Alexia.
Yes, sir. I'm going to almost restate some of what was just said. You're right on the, when we work with industry to try to identify what requirements and what needs to be done with the FAA, many times they do not know who has the responsibility and the authority across the whole gamut of what that industry is trying to do to get it accomplished. So there is a structural issue that needs to be addressed, and it can't be put in very low levels of the FAA. It has to be raised to a priority level that can drive across the FAA some level of hey, let's get on board and move this thing forward. The other thing I brought up in my opening statement is, okay, once we get the structural place in some place with responsibility, what is the path forward? What is the regulatory gaps? What is missing in regulation? And lay it out from all aspects of what industry and first responders, public safety is trying to accomplish. Without that, we're just going to continue to, everything is going to be a one-off. And as my colleague Lisa and good friend said, the folks inside the FAA that we work with day in and day out are trying, and they're working very, very hard, but they run into these barriers throughout the whole process.
Mr. Feynman.
So I'll add 2 points to your question here. Number one is deadlines. Nothing gets done without a schedule, goals, and deadlines, and some of what happens here happens without deadlines, and so will we have an AAM Certification Act in 2024, or Regulation 2024? Will we have it later? If we put in deadlines and hold an organization accountable to those deadlines, things tend to get done. So that is the first thing I would say. The second thing that I would say is mindset of safety mandate versus innovation. There seems to be sometimes in order to fulfill our safety mandate, we have to take our time to make sure we get this right, as if somehow innovation is a threat to safety. But in fact, what we have seen time and again is that innovation leads to safety. Historically, we have seen this with synthetic vision systems, terrain warning systems, weather radar, all of which were innovations that led to increased safety. And in fact, we don't have to do safety or innovation. It can be safety and innovation that drives safety. So for example, as we are sitting here today, there's a hurricane going on in Florida, and drones could have a lot to do with improving the safety and the recovery from that hurricane. So those are the 2 things, deadlines and accountability to deadlines, and number 2 is safety mindset, and innovation can lead to safety. It is not a threat to safety. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Boland?
Yeah, coordination and communication is key. As you know, the FAA has different lines of business, air traffic organization, airports, certification, safety. All of these need to be coordinated and communicating with each other. That doesn't happen without direction and purpose. They need to be very intentional. I also want to underscore what has just been said about deadlines. It was brought up earlier that the FAA will now use an approach that requires a special federal aviation rule regulation in order to move forward. The expectation is that that will be done in 2 years. It is important that we stick to that time frame and that we work backward trying to determine what needs to be done. We also need to recognize that the FAA's approach, and one that the industry largely supports, is a crawl, walk, run approach. We're going to start with what we know, and we're going to iterate. We're going to evolve. We're going to adapt as new technologies and new operations come forward. We've got to make sure that it is, in fact, an iterative process. Just this week, we had a new design engineering brief for vertiports. Really critical as we're moving forward to a new vertiports AC, hopefully within 2 years. But we've got to start conservative, but build out, iterate, and get to the promise of advanced air mobility.
Okay, and Mr. Davis?
The advanced air mobility market, for our subset of the advanced air mobility market, common certification standards for aircraft battery technology that allows us to commercialize our product and bring it to market around the world is a key thing that we would need from the FAA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd now recognize Senator Rosen, who's joining from our office. Senator Rosen? Oh, Senator Rosen, we're not able to hear you. We still aren't able to hear you, Senator Rosen. Senator Rosen, do you have a few minutes to have someone help you technically? Okay. I'm going to go to Senator Moran, and then we'll be right back to you, Senator Rosen. Thanks.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. And I thank our panelists here and by technology for their presence today on a very significant and important topic for the future of our country's well-being. Let me start with I have a couple of questions is all, but let me start with Ms. Ellman. During your testimony, you mentioned the future role that this technology could play in supporting the agricultural sector. Can you further comment on the importance of merging these two industries, businesses?
Absolutely. So there are so many use cases, including precision agriculture, where the UAS industry is just bringing so many efficiencies to enterprise, and agriculture is one. We're seeing so much growth in that specific vertical market sector. So drones can be used for everything from what are traditionally very dangerous crop spraying, aerial agricultural spraying jobs. As I noted in my testimony, just in 2020, there were 13 aerial agricultural deaths, including in your home state of Kansas, and 54 accidents. And this is something that drones, these deaths don't have to happen. Drones can do the job just as well as inspecting crops and performing other, critical precision agriculture as our population continues to grow and farmers are under increasing pressures to be efficient. Drones add efficiencies, add safety, and make agriculture so much more efficient and safe.
I thank you for that answer. And as a state, Kansas is a significant aviation and aerospace component of our economy, and it's certainly the same when it comes to agriculture. And I love the opportunity to see the opportunities we have in our state to advance both really in the same effort, same time frame. Yes. So thank you. Mr. Boland, on Monday, the FAA released new design guidelines for vertiports, ports, infrastructure that will support advanced air mobility aircraft. Could you give the subcommittee some insight into what the NBAA and industry leaders are doing to focus on the infrastructure side to support these new aviation entrants going forward?
I'd be happy to. And again, thank you, Senator, for your leadership on the Advanced Infrastructure Modernization Act. That's a very, very important part of moving forward. Obviously, we have, as we've discussed, an incredible airport infrastructure in the United States, 5,000 public use airports. But when we look at the potential for advanced air mobility, we see the opportunity to move to vertiports, starting at airports, but also moving to parking lots, city buildings, and other types of operations. We've looked to the FAA for an engineering brief to allow us to begin moving forward with the vertiport standards. We did have an opportunity as a community to provide comments on that. What we saw on the engineering brief that was released on Monday is many of those comments were recognized, but the FAA is taking a very conservative approach with the idea that as we move to the ultimate vertiport advisory circular, we will iterate, we will begin understanding operations and technologies, and we'll be able to ultimately have a vertiport infrastructure that is able to adapt and evolve with technologies and operations. We now have a place to start, and it is a great beginning, but we have to evolve it and adapt it. So we are looking at this as the first step in an important iteration, and that is a key part of the infrastructure as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. And Senator Sinema, thank you for your assistance, our working together on this piece of legislation, and particularly your help in making sure that it received time on the Senate floor. Thank you to both you and Senator Cruz for today's hearing.
Thank you, Senator Moran. Senator Rosen, let's give it another shot.
Well, can you hear me now, as the famous line goes?
Yes, Senator Rosen, we can hear you, and you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Chairwoman Sinema. Thank you, Ranking Member Cruz. This hearing is really important. I appreciate witnesses being here today. One of the things I've been worried about is protecting stadiums from drones, because Nevada, you know, we're at the forefront of the UAS technologies. And our state, our UAS test site at the University of Nevada, Reno, is leading the way in autonomous vehicle testing and robotics research. And we have been designated by the FAA to serve as a center for the development and testing of unmanned autonomous vehicles operating beyond visual line of sight, excuse me. We're also, of course, home of the entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, which is quickly emerging as the sports capital of the world as well. I'm going to give a shout out to the WNBA champions, Aces, this past few weeks, and of course, Formula One racing coming next year. And according to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, we're also the first city to have secured the NFL Draft, Pro Bowl, and the Super Bowl at our new Allegiant Stadium, home to the Las Vegas Raiders. Unfortunately, this stadium, like so many others across the country, is a potential target for drone attacks by bad actors. So, Ms. Ellman, as we make UAS policy decisions, how can we promote continued innovation and advancement in drones while protecting critical infrastructure like stadiums from evolving threats? And Mr. FEMA, I understand your company has some experience in the area, so perhaps you might answer after Ms. Ellman, please.
Sure. Thank you very much, Senator Rosen, for that very important question, and thanks for your Nevada's leadership on all things sports. Absolutely, it's a critical issue. Let me just start by saying, you know, obviously most drone operators are compliant, responsible, abiding by the laws. But of course, all technologies can be used for good and for bad, and drones are no different. Drones can also be used for harm. Just like the UAS use set of regulations has really lagged behind the emerging technologies, so have the counter-drone or drone security set of laws and regulations. And because of that, the Commercial Drone Alliance is on the record supporting Senator Peters' legislation on counter-UAS. We support the extension of the Preventing Emerging Threats Act, which expires next week, October 5th. It would also enhance detection authorities. It would also set up a limited counter-UAS pilot program with strong federal oversight and training. We really see innovation and security as two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. So we, and I know stadiums as well are looking to incorporate drones into their own operations. So we 100% agree that it's a very important issue, and look forward to working with you and your staff on the legislation that's out there and on other good ideas as well.
And Mr. Ullman, if you quickly answer, then I have some other questions on drones and infrastructure to go back to both of you as well.
Great, thank you. And I think to add to my colleague Lisa's answers, I think that in the world of drones, all drones are identified, whether it is remote ID or other technologies like that make them conspicuous. So I think that is very important to do. Most cybersecurity issues always fall down into the areas of either technology or the people using the technology. On the technology side, we need to ensure that drones, the cybersecurity is built into the technology that goes onto the drones, much as what we do when we build cybersecurity and everything into the avionics systems and others that we make for larger aircraft. I think that those principles have to continue all the way through. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to move on and continue to talk about drones as they relate to infrastructure, because whether we have, we're getting drones to do our deliveries, photography, and everything in between, drones have really proven helpful across a range of industries, including infrastructure, construction, and inspections, because drones offer contractors and engineers a really efficient and agile way to use this technology to gather data. They can go in and around bridges, in and around small places in infrastructure. This can help minimize accidents and find issues early. And Ms. Ellman, I really thank you for recognizing my recently introduced bill, the Drone Infrastructure Inspection Grant Act, and its bipartisan legislation creating grants for local, state, and tribal governments to use drone technology to be their eyes and visually inspect infrastructure and train employees how to properly use them. So we've invested significantly with the bipartisan infrastructure law to repair and update our nation's infrastructure. So Ms. Ellman and then Colonel Lux, with the backlog of inspections, we know drones can speed up the process. What do you think we need to do to get the workforce and the drone force, if you will, up to speed? I know I'm just about the end of my time, but it's critically important we can use this and we can save lives, I believe, by doing that maintenance faster. Ms. Ellman, you can go first, then Colonel Lux.
Sure, absolutely, and thank you, Senator Rosen, and thank you for your leadership, and Senator Blumenthal and Senator Bozeman for introducing the DIG Act in the Senate. We're bipartisan legislation. We are strongly supporting it. As you mentioned, there's a backlog of critical infrastructure inspection. Drones can certainly help clear that backlog more efficiently and more safely. The DIG Act, I think, is a first start in terms of how do you move all this forward by investing funds in moving, both in the workforce of tomorrow and as well as in the enabling states and localities to actually invest in the technology themselves. So we're strongly supportive of it. I think we also need to look at the rules, however, because many of these long linear infrastructures require flights beyond visual line of sight, for example, and there's still no broad rulemaking that enables that here in the United States. So really, in order to move this forward long term and to be able to scale these operations, we also need to implement the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee recommendations as well.
Thank you.
And Senator Rosen, thank you. Thank you for the support on that bill. So the regulation needs study on how to get these things in place. And the good news story is we are already working on, the FAA has tasked ashore to look at areas of called shielding and right-of-way rules to support beyond visual line of sight operations in these types of inspections in the future. So already efforts are moving forward at least within the FAA to start getting this to happen.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to take just 1 second of personal preference. My late father-in-law, who I loved dearly, was a bridge inspector for the city of Los Angeles for over 50 years. He would have been so excited to use these drones as he would have done his work. So I think about him today and the technology that we're going to use to continue to work on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Thune, you're recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just say that the title came to the Las Vegas Aces after they hired a South Dakota native, Becky Hammond, to be their coach. So.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you for bringing her to. Thank you for letting us have her. We're going to keep her if you don't mind, Senator Thune.
That's okay. Yeah, I don't blame you. During my time as chairman of this committee, we considered and enacted the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, which concluded substantial new authorities for the FAA to modernize the national airspace system and better accommodate new entrants. And since that time, the agency's moved forward with several significant actions, including rules governing remote identification and operations at night or over people for unmanned aircraft systems. However, significant work remains to ensure that the UAS and other entrants are fully integrated into the NAS, including a generalized process for type certification of UAS and advanced air mobility aircraft, a consistent regulatory framework for beyond visual line of sight operations for UAS, and clear rules to ensure the safe interaction of these new entrants with manned aircraft. As this committee begins consideration of the next FAA reauthorization, I look forward to these conversations and appreciate hearing from you all today. Ms. Ellman, in April of this year, I sent a letter with Senator Warner to Acting Administrator Nolan requesting information on the FAA's progress in establishing generalized standards for UAS type certification. I believe the development of these standards will ensure that UAS conducting complex operations in the NAS will deliver clear commercial and societal benefits and keep the United States at the forefront of safety and innovation. Do you believe that developing generalized standards for UAS type certification is an important component of advancing UAS integration?
Senator Thune, thank you so much for that question. Absolutely, we very much agree. The type certification process we've been talking all about the benefits of commercial drones, but really to take advantage of those benefits of commercial drones, we need to be able to scale expanded drone operations. And one path to do that is through type certification. And to date, we've had several drone manufacturers working for several years, hand in hand closely with the FAA, trying to get type certification. We have had, in some good news a few weeks ago, Modernization was the first company to actually get their type certification approved by the FAA. Now that there has been one company that has been approved, we very much hope to see many others who have been working with the FAA for several years on this process. Approvals come quickly. But we also believe that now is a good time to think about how to streamline and improve this process, which the durability and reliability process was meant to take 6 months. It's not well designed. 4 years and 4 months later, I believe, is how long it took Modernization to get their type certification. By that time, how many new iterations of the vehicle, the technology is moving so quickly forward. We need a process that is designed and tailored for this new industry, which is designed differently. And so we very much appreciate your leadership on that. We have our own airworthiness reform proposals and ideas that we would be very excited to sit down with you and your staff and discuss.
Okay. Mr. Bolin, in your testimony, you also described challenges with the current type certification process for AAM aircraft. Do you believe the development of generalized standards would also be useful in fostering the integration of AAM aircraft into the NAS?
Yeah, absolutely as well. We talked about the importance of predictability and certainty, and there's an enormous amount of investment being made to try to bring these products to the market. Understanding a clear pathway to a type certificate, production certificate, op specs, being able to begin the operations. It's very important for us to know what to expect as we prepare. So the clearer the path, the better opportunity we have to arrive at our destination.
Thank you. Colonel Luxian, I remain very interested in ways to improve automated aspects of air traffic management, especially as the NAS becomes more crowded. This includes a bill, the Dynamic Airspace Pilot Program Act, which I've introduced along with the chair, Senator Sinema, to improve dynamic management of the NAS. What can this committee do to build on the work that FAA is doing to improve these automation tools and reduce the burden of increased traffic on controllers and adopt concepts such as adaptive airspace or dynamic airspace?
Thank you, Senator Thune, for that question. The NASA has really done groundbreaking effort and work in this area to move it forward. We need to create a bridge from that NASA work into the actual regulatory requirements. How do you change all the technologies and all the questions or answers that NASA has provided into a regulatory structure at least below 500 feet to provide that? This UTM is critical, absolutely going to be the backbone to deal with all the increased activity and small UAS. They're going to operate beyond visual line of sight below that 500 feet or 400 feet and below. I would say that needs to be part of the Reauthorization Act to establish the regulatory framework to support UTM going forward.
Yeah, hopefully it will be part of the Reauthorization Act. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Thune. Recognize Chair Cantwell for 5 minutes next.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, I want to congratulate you again on yesterday and the flight of Alice. Very exciting news in the aviation world, as you made comment to earlier. This was no small achievement, and I know that the work has been ongoing by you and many others. So again, congratulations on your efforts to decarbonize aviation and have electric planes. I wanted to follow up on your comments and maybe tie in Mr. Boland as well. When we look at essential air service and we look at some of our challenges in transportation, I understand your current plans, or the idea was originally for a 2027 date, and that is you already have commitments from Cape Air, a regional carrier, and DHL for cargo. What steps does Congress need to take to continue to look at this issue you brought up of coordination between the FAA and DOE on battery standardization?
Well, thank you very much, Chair Cantwell, and again, thank you for the kind welcome. It was a very exciting day. I'm actually here at our flight test facility, the Aerotech flight test facility in Moses Lake right now, not very far from where we flew. There are many aspects to what we're doing here with the electric aircraft that play into the broader discussion, as well as the specific infrastructure requirements. We talked about the walk, crawl, run methodology that we've generally accepted in aviation. It certainly doesn't feel like a crawl or a walk with what we're doing right now, but what we are doing is an important stepping stone to actually bringing electrified aviation to the marketplace. We are choosing the path of taking an electric conventional takeoff and landing airplane and developing that for electric propulsion and battery power. What that allows us to do is to leverage the existing airspace requirements. So we take off from an airport, we fly in airspace, and we land at an airport. It allows us to focus on the technology development. The FAA discussion we had before about aiding in the certification of batteries, making sure that we're using advanced technology as quickly and as safely as possible to enable the mission profiles that we're looking for. Those right now essential air service routes that are typically less than 250 nautical miles, or less than 300 statute miles. And then also adapting the advanced operating technology for the aircraft to allow for single pilot operations, which is again on the pathway to full autonomous operation for cargo and eventually passenger operations. With respect to the DOE and potentially DOT and FAA, what we need to do is to look at the establishment of the charging infrastructure. The good news compared to, say, the broader automotive charging infrastructure is whether it's the 2,000 airports that have had some service or are very near large urban centers, or the broader 5,000 airports. In aviation, unlike in a car you want to be able to go wherever you want to go when you want to go there. In aviation, we tend to want to take off exactly when we meant to, go exactly where we wanted to, and land exactly where we wanted to, all on schedule. So it becomes much easier, especially in the essential air service map, to develop that infrastructure. What we're looking at doing, and with those customers that you've identified, in particular with Cape Air, is building out a proof network showing that we can actually operate in a subset and then scaling it from there. And that's where certainly interaction between the FAA on the airport side and on the aircraft charging interface and the DOE in terms of overall battery technology will benefit the industry.
And what about DHL, though, when you're talking about cargo? Because obviously you're talking about a marketplace of whatever, 9 passengers or something like that. When you're talking about cargo, what is the profile there?
So thank you for that. The cargo missions are going to be very similar. So again, it's that last 100 miles of delivery. It's taking out 2 or 3 hours of delivery time for the packages that we want to see arriving. Again, though, it's going to be point to point, for the initial deployment of the aircraft, we will know where the aircraft are intended to go. I mean, we as an industry will know specifically which airports they'll be operating from, and so we need to start there and help build up the infrastructure.
Well, this, to me, seems like a game changer. When I think about some of our problems, particularly with the airlines and, even with the expansion of Payne Field, and people are happy to have, flights to Palm Springs and Hawaii and various places. I'm sure a lot of people wanted flights to Spokane. So the notion that Walla Walla, that's constantly shortchanged, very big and growing wine region of our country, but one flight a day or 2 flights a day, you could change that. And you could have people going, 5 or 6 flights a day. Now it's all economical. So you're changing the dynamics of a rural economy. And that could be a very interesting solution for driving efficiencies into the marketplace.
Yes, thank you for that. So certainly with the aircraft that we're developing and this being the first entrant into the sector, you will immediately be able to actually produce less emissions on that same duration of trip than you would in a car. There's literally no tailpipe on the aircraft. So the emissions that we produce are during the production of the aircraft and from the power that's derived from the energy grid wherever you're operating the aircraft. There's plenty of opportunity to make that better. One of the and I thank you very much for your words about changing the industry, changing the world. It's exactly how we see it. It's a very easy game to play, to think, where are you right now? And could you find 9 people or 8 other people who wanted to go, 200 or 300 miles away right now? And, from Moses Lake to Walla Walla or to Payne Field, as you've just said, those are routes that we will be able to do as the aircraft enters into service. So certainly the applications and the capability of the technology that goes into the aircraft will allow those routes to expand and only further improve our capability to transform regional air travel.
And I see my time has expired, Madam Chair, but your testimony references the fastest growing emission increase. Is that because of the global demand in aviation? Is that where you're getting that?
Yes, thank you for that. So absolutely, it's very important for us to recognize aviation in particular is a global business. It's well said that airplanes tend to get around. So again, this actually does present the commercial opportunity that we have to take the leadership role again in driving standardization of certification requirements. Right now, again, speaking for aviation, we truly feel that we are in a leadership position, that we are ahead of certifying and bringing an aircraft to market that can fulfill these mission roles. And so this is a global problem. Those emissions are global emissions and projections. No one country can do this on its own. It needs to be done by everybody. And so by working together and establishing common standards, it will remove barriers to bringing product to market, which will further our ability to impact positively change sooner.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Cantwell. Senator Lee, you're recognized for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Ellman, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. I've long been concerned about the FAA's regulatory processes and the fact that they're not keeping pace with modern technology, from supersonic aircraft to launch and reentry for space vehicles. It's a slow process that's hindering technology, or it's not allowing technology to proceed. But your testimony highlighted how this isn't limited to space vehicles and supersonics. It covers other areas as well, like drone regulations are also being held back by the FAA's current processes. Now, you noted that the GAO and the DOT Inspector General, as well as the National Academy of Sciences, have weighed in on this, and they've referred to the FAA's lack of progress in this area as, I think the word they used was indefensible. Now, I completely agree. I would call it, and I do call it, indefensible, and I think Congress should address this in next year's FAA legislation. The Part 135 process, to me, seems expensive and something that probably wasn't intended for drones. Absolutely, certainly wasn't intended for drones. Not designed for drones, not well suited for drones. What do you think about this? Do you think Part 135 and the process that's involved in it, you think that makes sense for drone carriage? And should we consider a drone-specific carriage process that reflects drone realities?
Thank you for that very important question, Senator Lee. I would, yeah, absolutely. As I remarked earlier, part of the challenge here, the technologies move so much more quickly than the policies, and we're, essentially the FAA is attempting to fit a square peg into a round hole. Regulations that were designed for the crewed aviation industry directly to drone use, which don't have people on board, very, very, very different in some ways, closer to kind of like, what looks like a cell phone versus a 737. So absolutely, we need new rules that are drone specific. The Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee considered exactly this and looked at from a regulatory perspective, provided recommendations to the FAA on how, in a risk-based, performance-based way, the FAA could broadly enable scaled commercial delivery operations. And I think that provides a framework and for the FAA to use that we would like to see implemented expeditiously. It touches on airworthiness, it touches on airspace, it touches on crew and operator qualifications. It essentially provides a roadmap to the FAA on how bringing all relevant stakeholders together, industry working together with academia and states, localities, and others to craft these recommendations, how we can do that in a way that enables us to take advantage of the benefits of commercial drones.
No, I think that's right, and it's sad that the one thing holding us back, because all the players you mentioned are ready, willing, eager, able to do this. It's the regulatory chokehold and the fact that they're stuck in this Byzantine labyrinth of the 135 process that makes absolutely no sense here. It drives me crazy. There are quality of life issues. There are public safety issues. There are environmental issues that could all be addressed favorably, relieved significantly by drone delivery. And yet the FAA leaves us stuck in the Stone Age on this, and it's unacceptable. I'm also concerned that we risk further delays to the effective integration of drones if we don't answer some of the outstanding key questions regarding the scope of federal preemption and the role of state and local governments. For example, the National Conference of State Legislatures at NCSL has raised some of these questions specifically, and I'm quoting here. Does the FAA have the authority to regulate all drone operations, including low-altitude operations? How will property rights and nuisance claims, an area of law traditionally within state and local police powers, be impacted by drone low-altitude operations? And what's the scope of civil and criminal trespass authority in low-altitude airspace? The GAO addressing some of these topics in a 2020 report concluded as follows, quote, the legal uncertainty surrounding these and other issues presenting challenges to integration presenting challenges to integration of UAS into the national airspace system. Successful integration may involve balancing the social and economic benefits anticipated from U.S. operations with constitutional protected property and privacy rights. It may also involve balancing the federal government's constitutional rights and responsibilities to regulate interstate commerce with the state's constitutionally reserved police powers and principles of federalism, close quote. Ms. Elman, do you agree with the GAO's assessment here that the successful integration will likely require balancing of these state and local interests?
Absolutely. I mean, so yes, and thank you for that question, Senator Lee. States and localities have an incredibly important role to play in UAS integration, and I would point to successful programs such as the Integration Pilot Program and the Beyond Program as examples where industry works closely, has been and is continuing to work closely with states and localities to move innovation forward together with the federal government. From our perspective, it is important that safety remains kind of, the FAA speaks with one voice there. If there's a patchwork quilt of regulations, it will be very difficult for companies to scale, and we want to be able to scale in a way that the industry grows and we're able to take advantage of all of these benefits. But that said, of course, states and localities have a critical role to play. I would also point to Section 2209 of the 2016 Extension Act remains not yet implemented by the FAA, and that section gives the FAA the authority to establish fixed fixed site facilities, private entities to essentially declare themselves no drone zones, limit or prohibit drone flights over their own property, which would take care of a lot of those concerns. So we'd ask the FAA to expeditiously implement 2209, and we would be very excited to work with you and your staff. And many of our members are doing lots of outreach in their communities. I would point, for example, one of our board members, Zipline, is working on back to school and doing lots of stuff in their communities, and that's true across the board. It's absolutely critical that we have a great working relationship in towns and communities where we operate.
Okay, so that we still do need to know the scope of preemption. We need to know the nature and extent of the limits on federal authority here. A lot of these programs weren't designed with an appreciation for on-the-ground realities that are specific to drones, that are very different. We're not in the realm of United States versus Cosby anymore, which contemplates traditional aircraft, airplanes, fixed wing, sometimes rotary wing aircraft, involving the carrying of humans in addition to any other cargo. This is very, very different. A drone, which can fly down to inches above the blades of grass on somebody's lawn, can fly right up to and against, in theory, into somebody's window. It presents some things that are very obviously within the domain of state and local authority. Nuisance law, laws prohibiting voyeurism, things like that, are all necessarily within the police powers of a state or a locality. If we can't get this right, if we can't grasp what it is that's the nature and extent of the FAA's authority, where it preempts, while acknowledging that it can't preempt all things. If we don't get that ironed out quickly, we're going to be in bad shape.
We would welcome the opportunity to work with you and your staff on this very complex topic, absolutely. And I know
you'll help us get there. You'd be willing to help us delineate where those limits should be.
We're happy to help. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lee. And with that, we've reached the end of today's hearing. Thank you to all of the witnesses for your time and testimony. The hearing record will remain open for 4 weeks until October 26th of 2022. Any senators that would like to submit questions for the record should do so 2 weeks from now by October 12th, 2022. I ask that witness responses be returned to the committee by October 26th of 2022. That concludes today's hearing.